This could be the biggest news story of my life. Before my eyes even open, the news is on. Need to know what's doing, the weather, some scores. Today, I wonder if I'm even awake. I hear the newscaster, but this can't be. I must be having a nightmare. Is it April 1st? California, Arizona, Colorado, and half the American West seceded from the United States, gone to pursue a different destiny. How can this be? What will our flag look like? This could be the biggest news story of my life. Yet, when the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and a group from Manasseh separate from the Israelite nation, the biblical text, as seen in Deuteronomy 3:12-20, sees it as routine. That should strike us as deeply strange. The people are complaining, "Who will feed us meat?" in Numbers 11. This seems to be a reasonable request. While the manna was sufficient for keeping the people fed, one can understand the people's cry for variety in their diet. But what happens next is unusual. The people are upset and recall their diet in Egypt. One would expect the people to say, "We remember and yearn for the lamb chops, steaks, venison, and veal cutlets we used to eat in Egypt." But that's not what they say at all. What they say is, "We recall the fish we ate freely in Egypt, the cucumbers, watermelons, leeks, onions, and garlic." What is missing is that they have no recollection of eating meat in Egypt. By now, it would be fair to assume that there was no meat available to the Israelites in Egypt. That would be wrong. It says in Numbers 32, the children of Reuben and Gad had vast amounts of cattle. To assemble vast amounts of sheep, goats, and cows takes many years of breeding. How can one juxtapose the availability of large amounts of herds with a diet that contains no meat? The children of Israel are not really complaining about meat. The text is suggesting strongly that unequal access to the meat may be the real issue here. That sounds like a reasonable complaint until you consider the reaction of God and Moses to this request. Up until this point, the people were eating only manna. Perhaps one day archaeologists will discover an ancient Israelite cookbook entitled 100 Ways to Prepare Manna. But despite its shape, color, or aroma, everyone must have known it was still manna. The grievances of the people sound rational. "No more manna, please. Give us meat." Yet, it says, Moses heard the people crying, each family at the entrance to their tents. God became very angry, and in the eyes of Moses, this was also a bad thing. What's going on here? Why is God becoming very angry, and how can one explain Moses' reaction? Moses is not only upset about the behavior of the people, but he tells God, "I cannot bear this people anymore by myself. It's too heavy for me. And if you will deal with me this way, kill me." Wow. Moses had a lot on his plate, other than his daily dose of manna, and at some point you knew he was going to have enough with the complainers. But over this? It's hard to understand his reaction and being ready to die over the people's rational yearning for meat. God is irate. Moses is having a meltdown. This cannot be about meat. There's more going on here than meets the eye. But what could it be? Abundant cattle exist in the Reuben and Gad camps, but the text seems to indicate that it hasn't reached the broader population. This request is about those who have livestock and those who do not. The text tells us Reuben, Gad, and the princes have. The text is silent about anyone else having livestock. Is Moses despondent because there's a sharing problem in the nation? Is this why God is very angry? God tells Moses, "Tell the people to make themselves holy for the morrow." God tells Moses that he will send lots of meat through the quail. This sounds like a very reasonable God responding to the people's plea with a solid plan. However, the text continues, "You will not eat for 1 day, nor for 2, not for 5 days, nor 10 or 20 days, for 1 month, until the meat is coming out of your noses and becomes disgusting to you, because you rejected the Lord who is in your midst and cried before him, saying, 'Why did we leave Egypt?'" Why is God lashing out at the people? If the issue is unequal access to meat, shouldn't the target of God's ire be Reuben and Gad? One can imagine the millions of quail that God brought to feed the camp for an entire month. The people gorged themselves on the quail, quite content with the meat they had demanded. But the story doesn't end there. The meat was still between their teeth, still unchewed. The Lord's anger flared against the nation. The Lord smote the people with a very harsh blow. Why is God so upset? Didn't he solve the problem? Many traditional commentators point to God not liking when the ungrateful people say, "Why did we leave Egypt?" which God cites when he's discussing the issue with Moses. Except there's a problem here. The text doesn't record the people saying that phrase at all. There's something else happening here, something that's been overlooked. What about Moses wanting to be killed over this? The text says that God immediately alleviated his burden and appointed 70 elders to remove some of the weight from his shoulders. Moses doesn't beseech God to kill him again. Moses gets assistance. The people eat an abundance of quail. Problem solved. Or was it? Overwhelmed by what's occurring in the camp, Moses asks God to take his life. This is a bigger issue than one might have thought, and it's more than a simple straw breaking the camel's back. It's a sign that the leader isn't doing his job and that the nation is fractured. Within this context, it's easy to understand Moses' frustration. Something is going very wrong. A volcano is about to erupt. God gives the people more meat than they could ever have wanted, but he doesn't lash out at Reuben and Gad. Was the crisis averted? When the time comes for the territory of the land of Israel to be divided between the tribes, Reuben and Gad and a group from Manasseh tell Moses they don't want to inherit a portion. They want to settle across the Jordan River in the lands that belong to the vanquished kings Sihon and Og. They don't want to be part of the Israelite narrative anymore. Those two tribes are feeling a gigantic disconnect with the rest of the people. What is the pretext they use for wanting to secede? They bluntly tell Moses the answer. It's their cattle. If this decision reflects the earlier conflict, then the crisis was not resolved. If they had gained wealth, even as slaves, why should anyone else be entitled to it? Despite God not punishing them or even criticizing them for not helping solve the camp meat crisis, they still wanted out. Reuben and Gad's decision to quit the nation and settle separately outside the Promised Land suggests a greater issue than just the people wanting to eat meat. A nation rarely splits overnight. Long before borders change, hearts separate. The request for meat was not the cause of the secession. It was the warning that the nation had already begun to fracture. Thanks for watching.